On this episode, we sit down with Christopher G. Moore, one of Bangkok's most well-known authors.
So if you're curious how living in Bangkok affects the creative process, you'll love this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who followed a friend to Thailand in 2001 and kind of just stuck around doing stuff and things and stuff ever since.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 17 years ago, fell in love with Thailand's policy towards women seeking refugee status, and I never left.
All right, well, before we start, a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. For more info on how you can become a patron and get cool goodies and gifts and secret stuff, just head to the support page on bangkokpodcast.com.
We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and coincidentally, we chatted about the case of a young Saudi woman who barricaded herself into her hotel room at the airport until she was granted protection by the UN. We also talked about how it relates to Thailand's policy towards refugees, and what was so different about this case that made Thailand suddenly very aware that the whole world was watching. So check it out.
It's interesting times, never boring in Thailand. All right, well, on this episode, we're very lucky to have one of Bangkok's best-known authors, multiple award-winning Christopher G. Moore. Christopher is a Canadian ex-lawyer who came to Asia in the 80s and has lived in Thailand since 1988, back when you and I, Ed, were just wee lads.
That's right.
He's written dozens of nonfiction works and has had essays appear in publications all around the world. He's probably most famous for the 30-plus novels he's written, including the very well-known Vincent Calvino series, which have been translated into a dozen languages. Now, Christopher was last seen on the podcast back in episode 44 of Season 1. He's a very nice guy, very cool to talk to, really smart, and we were very happy that he was able to come back on. So, here is my conversation with Christopher G. Moore. All right, well, we're very happy to have back on the show a young man by the name of Christopher G. Moore, celebrated author, famous expat, man about town. What is that fair to say?
Yes.
Chris, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you back again. The last time you were on the show was in Season 1, Episode 44, I believe, which was about 2011, so it's been a long time.
Yeah, that has been a long time, and as you know, 44 is one of those numbers that has particular meaning in Thailand. You know the meaning?
No, I know. I know the meaning of 42, the secret to life, the universe, and everything, but not
That's
44.
Douglas Adams. This is 44. This goes back thousands of years in Chinese history. It's because in Chinese characters and speech, 44 sounds like death.
Oh.
So basically, you will never want to stay in a room that's number 44 or go to the 44th floor. It's equivalent of number 13 in Western culture.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I'll pull that show up again and we'll retitle it the Conversation of Death with Christopher G. Moore.
If you could just retitle it 43A, that's normally the way it's handled.
Just like Sherlock Holmes. Didn't he live at something A Baker Street? Or
yes.
Something like that?
For the same reason.
I think so, yes. Well, I thought it would be very interesting to have you on because as we sort of stumble forward into the 21st century, the internet and social media, YouTube are completely rewriting the rules for how media is consumed, how stories are told, how people get creative. And you're a very well-known author and creative person in Thailand and around the world. So I'd like to get some of your thoughts on that. You sent me, so to start things off, you sent me a couple of essays you had written recently, and one of them was called The Tyrant Inside Your Mind, and it was very interesting, and I pulled a couple of quotes from that, and maybe we can go over them and get some feedback on that.
Good.
In it you said, a great story is about me. It's about you. It has an emotional kick like a mule. Without the mule's kick, the abstract story is marooned in a dark, empty pasture left pretty much on its own. So let's start with a quick overview of how you adhere to that when you write.
The way this strikes me is it's related to our sense of empathy. When you read a work of fiction in particular, what editors and publishers have long said, and I don't think a lot of people understand what it means, is I like your book, but I don't care about the characters. That's probably the worst thing that someone can say, because the way you hook someone in a work of literature or music or painting is that they've made you care about something, about someone. And so if you can care about those characters, you are involved in wanting their fate to be a good one. You want to follow their story because you can see something of yourself or something of others in their actions, in their behavior, in their family, their background. They're human to you, and you can relate to them directly. And when you can relate to someone directly, you can care about their feelings.
Right.
Now, going back to the social media, I mean, one of the things that's destroying, I think, our sense of empathy is that we care less about people who are not like us. And the moment you stop caring about people, some very bad things happen.
That's right.
Violence, war, genocide. That's when empathy ends. And the end of empathy is the end of caring.
I was just having this conversation with a random commenter on a Facebook or on a internet bulletin board the other day, and they said, "What's one story that you just remember giving you a gut punch, a kick by the mule," as you put it? And I will never forget reading a book called A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mistry, which haunted me. It destroyed me. The characters in that, you cared for them so much, and as you were reading, you were just thinking, please, Jesus, let something good happen to this character.
Sure.
And when it didn't, it killed you. And it literally had scared me away from quote-unquote real literature for years, because I was so affected by that in the best way possible.
Sure.
And if you can reach that level, then you're golden. But in the era of 12-second Instagram clips and 15-second YouTube hits, it's hard to do. It's hard to do.
Well, going back to the social media, but part of the fundamental change is the duration of our attention for stories. We want the emotional hit hard and fast. We won't be devoting a lot of attention to something that seems to drag, that seems to develop in particular ways. Those are kind of sensibilities, I think, that are bleeding out of our psychological system of how we're processing our reality, how we're relating to other people. We're doing it on a much shorter basis.
Yeah.
We have far less patience.
Yeah.
We have far less tolerance.
Yeah. I remember a YouTube clip I saw recently, and it was 14 seconds long, and the description was, make sure to watch to the end. Like, waiting 14 seconds, you have to give a special warning to people. Like, hey, I know you're busy, but if you don't have 14 seconds, you might want to reevaluate your day, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's part of the kind of skimming of information. If you think about most people throughout their day, they think, well, hey, I'm reading all day long, which is true. But it's reading in the sense that you skim the surface of something. We all read a lot of headlines. We all read the first 10 seconds or 14 seconds.
Sure.
And then after that, we move on to something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we surf 1,000 little waves of information, and at the end of the day, we don't feel that we really had exercise of the mind.
Exactly, yeah. Well, speaking of the internet and how it's changing things, in that same story, The Tyrant Inside Your Mind, you said something else that I thought was interesting, and you said most of the world, and for most of our history, the powerful have enjoyed a virtual monopoly over storytelling, and any storyteller that doesn't work for them is in mortal danger. Social media has destroyed that old analog monopoly.
I think that's right. It's very difficult for young people to understand because it is kind of the Wild West storytelling at the moment. If you have a particular kind of story that you like, and it can be a sub category of a story, it could be very subversive, And you're going to find there are other people out there who share that interest. It may not be a large number, but as a result, the second that you are out creating different storylines, you are outside the programming of a whole structure that's purpose is to educate you that these are the acceptable stories that tell you who you are, who we are, what is expected of you, what your motives and goals should be.
Have you ever gotten a peek inside a place that you didn't know before of who you are as you write?
There are those places, and the places, if you're writing stories about caring, making people care, it's very important to have a theory of mind of other people. Otherwise, you're simply projecting into someone else your sensibilities, how you would react to something. So it's something that everyone can learn to do, but part of creativity is learning to process some kind of incident or event through the eyes and the mind of another person.
Right. Storytellers need to do that. Actors need to do that.
Absolutely. It's basically the arc of a story that we've grown up with for thousands of years is basically it's an epic. Epics are about a person, a man or a woman, who is in jeopardy, who is under threat, who is afraid, who must make decisions for survival.
Right.
And we like that, but if we like the character, we want them to survive. We want to see ingenuity when it comes to that crucial moment. You go left, you go right. How do you make that decision? What does that say about that person? Mm-hmm. And that person is not necessarily you.
Right, yeah. Now, you've been in Bangkok a long time. How many years have you lived here?
Since 1988.
1988. Wow. I was talking with Ed the other night about this, about how, even after being here 17, 18 years, you still, after that, you feel like, yeah, I know this city pretty damn well. And then you meet someone who's been here twice as long as you. And you're like, oh, man, I'm still a noob, Now, something you said was relating how stories connect with our brains, but it also struck me as being sort of kind of apropos to Bangkok. And the quote was, superior information is buried under layers and layers of data, and it takes work to work through the equivalent of the bad mortgages before finding the undervalued AAA-rated corporate bond. And I think Bangkok is kind of like that. It's kind of like peeling an onion, So how does living in Bangkok for so long, how does it continue to shape your creativity and storytelling methodologies after so long? Are you bored after 30 years?
No, if I were bored, it wouldn't be the city; it would be me.
Nice. That's a pull quote. That's a T-shirt right there.
No one can be bored here if they have any spark of creativity or an impulse that leads to curiosity. There are too many little soys. Bangkok is 1,600 square kilometers. There is approximately 10 million people living in Bangkok. If you take the greater metropolitan area, the commute area, the suburbs, 14 million people are in and out of this city almost every day.
Yeah.
And probably about 3 million of them aren't registered here. They're registered up country. They've come here for a new life.
Right.
And so you can find all kinds of people. This is a hugely cosmopolitan, large, diverse city that you can collapse down the reality to a newspaper headline or to a magazine story, but that's usually a mistake. You're letting other people feed your creativity. Just get out of the shopping centers, go into some of the back soys, talk to some of the vendors there.
Yeah.
Go into some of the local markets at night.
Yeah. When I get out on the bike rides that I try to do as often as I can, although not as often as I used to now that I have a kid, it's amazing the stuff you can see. And I every time I get back from a bike ride, I think, I should have got a picture of that thing, or I should have taken a picture of that person, because there's just hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of pathways and roads and villages that you didn't even know existed, because they nearly can't be accessed by any other way, by a bicycle or on foot. And I will never get bored of exploring Bangkok like that.
go where cars can't go.
Yeah.
That's the main piece of advice. If you can go where cars can't go, and you will find all kinds of Bangkoks in Bangkok. It's not one experience. If you basically spend your time, as I mentioned in the essay that you've been talking about, Tyrant of the Mind, is that if you make your template that like of a shopping mall, okay, where basically the more times you go, the less you explore. You go to the same restaurant, you order the same thing on the menu. You don't go to the floors up or down. You know what you like. You know where you want to be.
Yeah. We've often talked about on the show about how living in Bangkok is not Thailand in the same way that Siam Square is not Bangkok. And you need to bust out of that bubble if you really want to get the full experience. Yeah. And speaking of sort of living in Thailand a long time and being an observer of Thai culture and the politics here and how things work, another quote I picked up on was, "Free will has become devalued as a kind of childlike fantasy." I don't think you were writing that specifically about Bangkok, but it seems to me that it could apply in some certain ways. How do you think about that when you're talking not about Bangkok, and then maybe can it also be applied to Bangkok, do you think?
Well, yeah, I think it probably could be applied. There's a big controversy over what is free will? Do we have it? Do we have a little bit or a lot? And it's an ongoing controversy. The point that the people who say there is no free will, they say, basically it's genetics. It's a combination of your upbringing, your history. There are all kinds of things that narrow your choice. So when it comes down to, would you like a glass of water or a glass of Coca-Cola, you can choose one. Is that free choice, what you mean?
I guess it depends who you ask, It's the quote I keep playing over and over in my mind is, of course, you can do anything in Thailand. You just can't do this. Of course we have free press in Thailand or any other sort of Southeast Asian country. You just can't talk about these things. And you're like, well, it's okay. I see what you're saying, but come on.
We all suppress different stories. Some people's stories may seem odd or weird or subversive. And for a lot of people, they say, stop, I don't want to hear that. But those are exactly the stories you should listen to, because those are the stories that you normally don't come across. Mm-hmm. Rather than shutting off the story that seems to be too weird, you've never come across, the key to this is simply opening up and finding out how a mind that tells that story works.
It's a really strange time now, because I agree with that wholeheartedly, and we've got unlimited television channels, we've got unlimited internet, we've got unlimited things to read, yet the scope of things that we focus on and digest seems to be narrowing because it only appeals directly to me. And this, of course, is what Facebook recommends, what Google recommends, whatever recommends. So you've got more choice than ever, but at the same time, it seems like a lot of people are not choosing anything except stuff that already reinforces their biases.
I think it's normal. We've always, tried to have our biases confirmed and reinforced. It's a normal kind of way that we've been engineered. Unfortunately, it's very hard to overcome that, to overcome the biases. You can be aware of them, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can control or defeat, because we all have. It's Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. System 1 is reaction.
Uh-huh.
That's evolution prepared us 100,000 years to react with a rule of thumb. Oh, that sounds like a tiger. You may be wrong, but if you're right 80% of the time, that's good enough to be a fool 20% of the time, rather than have it the other way around, which genetically you will have offspring in the future.
Like the one guy to say, what's that noise? Oh, don't worry about it.
Yeah,
he won't survive too long.
No.
I want to read this quote. It's a little bit long, but I thought it was really well put. resonated with me as I was thinking about social media and how it's kind of opened up a Pandora's box. I mean, social media can be a tremendous force for good, but it can also be just a shit show in so many different ways, you know. And this quote is, "We come to understand each day brings new stories and more stories in one day than the average person would have encountered 200 years ago in a lifetime. We are piled under the weight of millions of stories, piling up into impossible libraries that no one can master. The trend is to finance ever more persuasive story wars based on your personal information," which is similar to what we were just talking about. This doesn't sound like a very positive outlook for how things are going.
I think we have a basic hunger for stories. And so suddenly, what social media has done is saying, look, here is a free buffet. Everything you've ever wanted, from prawns to lobsters to oysters to prime rib to pizza, any kind of pastry you want, eat all day long. And that's what people are doing. If this was food that they were putting in their mouth rather than information, they would blow it out very quickly.
Right. Yeah. I'm familiar with that. Yeah. How do you look at the literary scene in Bangkok now compared to 30 years ago or 20 years ago? How has the consumption of stories and the consumption specifically of books here changed? We see new stories like in the renovations at Central World. They've got a beautiful new Asia Books. The Kinokuniya bookstore is a perennial favorite. Does Bangkok as a city, as a living city, have a thirst for books, for authors, for stories, for literature?
Every year at the Queen Circuit Center, there's a book fair. It is absolutely packed with Thai people. So when people say the Thais don't like reading or they're not interested in books, it's not true. Literally hundreds of thousands of people go through that over about a 3-day fair every year, and they're buying lots and lots of books.
I think my wife buys half of them.
Yeah, my wife buys books there as well. And so there is a reading culture here, and so on the Thai side, I think it's difficult for a Thai writer to make a living like it is for a Western writer as well, and they have additional obstacles in front of them in terms of getting published, because Thai is a difficult language, and the people who publish it can't expect much of a market outside of Thailand for their books. Right. Where someone who's writing in English, you've got all kinds of markets where people speak English as a native language or near native, that you have an ability to reach them.
Yeah. And your books have been translated into Thai.
Yeah, not all of them. About a half a dozen have been translated into Thai. Yeah.
What's been the feedback from the Thai readers of your books? Has it been different from the feedback you got from foreign readers, from English speakers?
Yeah, it really depends who you talk with. I would have, like anyone else, anecdotal things of talking to this person, that, or the other. But of thousands of Thais have read a book, there isn't a place for them to really engage or participate in a dialogue with the author, because it would be in the Thai language, and there's not a good filtering system for that to get through to people in other languages and other avenues. Like, for example, it would be rare for someone to leave a review on Amazon or Kobo.
I see. Well, as we're wrapping up here, I don't want to keep you too long. What are you working on now? Are you working? Do you primarily put your energies on novels? I see you write a lot of essays, more essays than I thought you would. Actually, every time I do a Google search, there's like, this magazine and this magazine, all over the world. So what's keeping you most busy right now and into the next couple of years?
I've got a new book coming out, nonfiction, called Rooms, on human domestication and submission. And so what I'm looking at is the notion of how about 6,000 years ago we suddenly became significantly less mobile. We started to build permanent structures, and how living in defined spaces has fundamentally changed us as human beings, our psychology, our economics, our technology, our art. So if you think about it, you're born in a room, and you die in a room. We're doing this interview in a room. And there was this room. Think how different this is from a time where there are no rooms. There's aircon here.
Yeah.
You're not feeling hot. You're feeling cool. You're feeling fine. You're not hearing outside noise. We are cocooned.
Right.
And most people spend a whole lifetime in one cocoon after another. So in this book, I examine the whole literature from hunter-gatherers to modern times of how we've evolved socially, politically, and economically from basically a hunter-gatherer culture where people moved every 2 months. They had no permanent rooms.
Right, right. Wow, that's really interesting. That's particularly interesting to me personally. I love reading about those things and how human culture had to adapt, because suddenly when someone figured out, like, oh, you put these things in the ground and then your food comes up,
right.
Suddenly they didn't have to move anymore, which meant suddenly they learned how to domesticate animals, and suddenly the guy who had the most animals was the most powerful guy, and that changed how people related to him. Suddenly your family wasn't necessarily the most valuable thing you could do. Maybe it was your cows or your corn or whatever. It's really interesting to see how those little tiny discoveries and changes have completely changed how we evolved over the thousands of years.
And I try to look at that and try to analyze what has happened along the way, the various kind of technological changes. I mean, if you think about buildings before there were elevators,
right.
You only could go so far up because people couldn't walk.
I read something the other day that said if elevators had never been invented, only the poor people would live in the penthouse. You know?
That's exactly right. Yeah. All the elite would be in the basement.
Yes, exactly.
So Rooms is about exploring what we lost with our mobility, what that meant for us, the way we lived with each other. We lived suddenly with strangers. I was talking about empathy before. So how do you deal with strangers who are not members of your band, your tribe? Because before, the way you dealt with them was you killed them.
Yeah.
It was pretty simple, straightforward.
It's been happening since the beginning of 2001, A Space Odyssey, when the guy figured out how to use a bone as a club.
Yeah. And so we keep pushing back the date of when Homo sapiens were Homo sapiens. It's now going back to about 290,000 years, and they've now discovered paintings in caves that are 40,000 years old. So we've had art and artistic expression for a very, very long time.
Right, right. Well, hopefully we will continue expressing and being artistic for a very, very long time still, because I think that's sometimes the only thing that keeps us sane.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we should become more the author of our own guidebook of what is sane and what is not.
Right. Right, that's good. There's going to be a whole wardrobe of T-shirts to come out of this conversation, because I'm going to sell them on your website. We're going to make $1 million, Chris. So we're going to be billionaires.
You've got your commission.
All right, sir. Well, thank you very much for coming back on the show, and we hope to have you back on in the not too distant future. Hopefully, it won't be another 7 years until you're back.
Well, I hope not. Maybe after when Rooms comes out, you'll have a read, and then I think it might stimulate another interview. We'll see.
I would love that. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Good to see you, Greg.
Thanks.
Bye.
Wow, that guy is a fascinating character. I got to say that his name I became aware of early in my time in Thailand when I was trying to learn Thai language, and I came across his book called Heart Talk, which is one of his books on Thai language, and it's essentially an entire book about all of the Jai expressions in Thai. So for our listeners who don't know, the word Jai in Thai means heart, and Thailand has many expressions using the word Jai. Even though the common expression "my cow Jai" means I don't understand, it means something has not entered your heart. And he wrote a whole book on all the different Jai expressions, and it's a really cool book, because I think that's a unique part of Thai language, that it has so many words about how people are feeling.
Jeez, Chris, I can't believe I just made that connection. Really? My Khao Jai means not in your heart? That makes sense. I never thought about it before. You mean it literally means like negative, cow meaning enter And Jai means
not enter heart.
I never thought about it before. It's always become just sort of like this guttural sound you make when you don't understand something. Like Jai.
Right.
I never broke it down.
Well, I think Jai.
I think
Jai can also mean your mind, maybe like your heart, your mind, your soul. So it relates to feelings, but also understanding.
I guess it's one of those words. It's one of those many words in Thai culture where there's, you pronounce it a different way and it means 15 different things.
Yeah, and so the guy's
still trying to wrap my head around.
So the guy's an expert on Thai language. He's written 30 novels. He's an ex-lawyer. Pretty fascinating character.
Like I said in the interview with, you and me, we've been here 17, 18 years and we think we're pretty we're pretty old hands at this Bangkok game. And then you meet someone like him who's been here for, for decades. And we're like, oh man, we don't know anything.
And he's also, no offense, he's also slightly more accomplished than we are.
Yeah. If he wasn't so nice, I might not even like him. He's accomplished. He's handsome. He's intelligent. And so thanks, Chris, for coming on. We really enjoyed talking to you, and hopefully we can have you on again in the near future.
Yeah, that would be great. He's the kind of guy we need to get him back on the show.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or leave, and that's where one of us surprises the other guy with a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or hate so much that it makes us want to leave forever. And this week it's my turn, and I know you're going to know what I'm talking about here, Ed. So you're out on a Saturday, and you need to get some shopping done. So you head into a mall, one of Bangkok's big malls, it could be any of them, and you are looking to your store. Okay, my store's over there. So you go up the escalator, and you go up another escalator, you're walking around, you go up another escalator, and maybe you go up another escalator. You think, what floor am I on? 1. What? So you've actually gone up like 4 levels, but you're on the first floor, because in this particular mall, whatever one it may be, you came in on like the G level, and then you went to the L level, and then you went to the M level,
the mezzanine,
and then maybe you went to upper mezzanine level, and then you're on the first floor. So you're actually on the first floor, but you're really on like the 4th floor. What do you think?
I'm glad you brought this up because it actually came up in my real life recently. But I'm definitely going to go loathe on this. I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't understand how floors are numbered in Thailand, and there do seem to be there's like basement, ground, like L. There's mezzanine levels. There's like split levels, and I totally can relate. And it's funny. This just reminds me of this argument I got in with my wife. My wife is renovating a space that she's going to use for a business, and she kept telling me how it like has 4 floors, and I went to go look at the space, and it has 5 floors. And so I was like, sweetie, why do you keep saying it has 4 floors? And she's like, because it has 4 floors. And I'm like, no, it's got 5. And so basically there's a floor that she thinks of as like the mezzanine, and it's like, I'm like, sweetie, you walk up steps, it's like another floor. That should be like the 2nd floor. And it's like, so it's so funny. It's like she actually looks at this thing as it really is a different way Thais count floors. Like,
well, I wouldn't even mind it if there was some sort of standardization of it, but it seems to be different all over the place.
Right.
Like some malls will throw in like an L or an upper lobby or
yes.
An upper mezzanine or something like that. So it just it screws with everything, and you never know what floor you're on.
Yeah, the mezzanine thing is pretty common, and I'm sure. I mean, obviously, I know the word mezzanine, so we must have mezzanines in the States, but it does seem that it's much more common to undercount floors. I don't know why that would be, but it does seem common to undercount floors. And I'm definitely going to go loathe. I find it very confusing. So
it's not, but it's not only Thailand. I mean, it's famous in big cities where they have tall buildings, tall residential buildings that, like, for instance, the average floor to the distance from the floor to the roof of a condo is 10 feet. But you buy a condo that is, the roof is 20 feet high. So you're on the 10th floor. The condo above you would actually be the 12th floor, because it's the 12th floor as compared to like the standard way that you count floors in buildings.
I see what you're saying.
And therefore it's higher. Therefore they can charge more per square foot or per square meter or something like that.
But in that case,
it's an old school trick.
But in that case here, they're kind of over-counting the floors. They're using distance from the ground, basically, in that
Yeah,
case.
yeah. It's just a similar sort of, well, not really similar. I guess that's sort of a manipulation of the numbers for financial gain, whereas this is just sort of seemingly has no rhyme or reason.
Yeah, I wonder what the point is. Maybe, apparently, we're going to have to get a mall developer to explain why they label the floors the way they label the floors.
Well, it'll be some big conspiracy with like the guys who build the escalators or something like that.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Loathe for you and loathe for me as well.
I guess so. So before we wrap up, I'd like to give special thanks to all of our patrons. As you know, we don't run ads. We don't have sponsors. So we really, really do appreciate the support we get from our patrons. If you want to learn more about being a patron, just head to bangkokpodcast.com/support. And if you want to get in touch with us, it's pretty easy. Just search for Bangkok Podcast on any type of social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We are very polite, and if you write us, we will answer you.
We're nice boys. You can also find us online, where we post each episode and carry on conversations with our listeners. You can also reach out to me directly on Twitter, where I'm BKK Greg, if you want. So thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you back here next week. After a while, you just get tired of saying Bangkok Podcast over and over again. We should just say Google Bangkok Podcast.
That's it. Seriously, that's all you got to do.